First off, the mood right now within the business community, you're speaking to many, many people across Liverpool, across the country. What is that feeling like across the business community?
I think we're all a bit frustrated because I don't think anybody 2 months ago would have anticipated us going into a full third lockdown. I think if you had half an eye on the news during December and through Christmas, you would have probably anticipated that we were heading that way. But nonetheless, businesses don't tend to plan week by week or day by day, as the government seems to do at the moment. We tend to plan in quarters, don't we? So a 3-year or 5-year plan, and then quarters in terms of action plans. So everybody really, I think, was geared up to come back in January and try and hit the ground running for the new year. So frustration, certainly. But I think also a bit of concern now because we would all concede that Rishi Sunak at the outset of this crisis did the right thing in terms of the package that he came up with of business support measures, not least the furlough arrangements that were put in place. But I think what he's forgotten is that that business support package was basically created for what we thought was going to be a 3-month crisis. We're now nearly 12 months into the same problem. And so the changes and the challenges have significantly shifted. And with it should be his policy. But he's sticking with the furlough as the silver bullet that's going to get business through this crisis. And unfortunately, it's nowhere near enough now. So we've written to the Chancellor, we've spoken to politicians at local and national level. And what we're suggesting is that several things, really. First thing is, fairly well publicised. There's 3 million people, company directors, people who operate as freelancers, who've actually been excluded from any help whatsoever. And the Treasury and Rishi Sunak was saying that it was difficult for them to put into place a scheme that they thought would be technically comprehensive enough for them to be able to manage and deliver. So Forgotten Ltd, a pressure group that's been working on behalf of those people, have actually created that very scheme and presented that to the Chancellor. He's still not moved on that yet, and I think that's disappointing. I think the cost of that would be about £2 billion, which matches the amount of money that supermarkets have handed back from the furlough cash they were awarded in the first round of the COVID crisis. So I think it's called the Directors' Income Support Scheme. I think he's got to implement that, and he's got to implement that quickly. Otherwise, we're going to see an awful lot of those 3 million people going out of business. I think the second thing is that the banks appear to me to have returned to their default position, which is computer always says no. And unfortunately, again, the initial C-bills loans that many companies apply for, they apply for those funds on the basis of, okay, how much do we need for 6 months? What will see us through a 6-month crisis? And of course, as I've said, we're now entering certainly 12 months, if not longer. So he needs to go back and have a conversation with the banks. The governor of the Bank of England needs to be putting pressure on the banks to say, we've got to look again at what we can do to support businesses. And listen, at the end of the day, Jay, people keep talking about debt. For me, this isn't debt, this is investment. All of the companies that we work with who are currently struggling are companies that in normal times would be thriving. We're not talking about companies here that were on the brink or companies that potentially would have gone pop anyway. We're talking about thousands of businesses across the country that are facing ruin simply because they're not getting that financial support that they need to continue the next quarter or however long it's going to be. Once we come out of that, they'll be able to crack on and do really well. So I think the banks need to play a much better positive role this year, as they started to do in the early stages of 2020. And then the final thing that we've said to the Chancellor is, again, he appears to think that businesses' only cost is attached to salaries. And again, you will know, Jay, as a business owner, that we have many other overheads, the rent, the rates, then you've got lots of other utility, but there's loads of other things that you're paying for in terms of your supply chain and the other services that you require as a business. Telephones, there's so many other things, and so the furlough scheme is actually only part of your armory now. You've got to start to again speak to the banks so that they are not putting pressure on commercial landlords, and then that enables the commercial landlord to give their tenants, their businesses, some leeway in respect of repayments of rent. Local authorities need to be told, back off in terms of business rates, and we'll help you through the next 12 months or so. And I think ultimately what I'd like to see is a narrative coming from government that is a bit more understanding and appreciative of the importance of small businesses in particular, who employ literally millions of people across the country. If we continue along the path that we've apparently signed up to now, with no further support, no further announcements from Rishi Sunak, it's estimated that 250,000 small businesses will go bust. I would predict that it's going to be more than that. And the governor of the Bank of England said on Monday that he believes the jobless total at the moment in this country isn't what the official figure says, but is nearer 2.5 million. So we're looking at an unemployment stat of 3 million, of north of 3 million, if this crisis continues and that business support isn't racked up. I haven't even spoken about the hospitality sector and the crises they're going through yet. But I do think that the Chancellor of the government needs to urgently look and review and refresh those business support packages, not least for those 3 million people who, up to this point, haven't had a penny piece support.
Frank, why wouldn't they get support? We've seen loads of this, the Forgotten Ltd campaign, and it's a great campaign, and it's sad really that they've had to put this together to put over to the Chancellor themselves. It's work that the government surely should have done. Why have they been forgotten? Why have they been left out of the funding that's been available?
I think, as I say, initially we all thought this was going to be a relatively short-term crisis, and I think most company directors would have said at the outset, 3 months, yeah, we can get through that. We've got money in the bank, we've got overdraft facilities, we can borrow on the assets that we own. And so for a 3-month period, and you've got a mortgage holiday, those other initiatives that were taken at that time. So we can get through 3 months. But, when it drags into 6 and then 9 and now 12, then you've got to have a fairly big war chest to get yourself through those sort of situations. And I mentioned earlier sole traders, but Jay, we're not just talking about sole traders. We're talking about a lot of people who are directors of companies who take a dividend rather than a salary, employ lots of people, and ironically are seeing their staff supported with at least 80% of their wage, but as I say, are not getting anything themselves. And again, there'll be some people watching this thinking, oh, well, if you're a director and you're claiming a dividend, you're doing that so as you get tax benefits. Well, I can tell you that probably 10 years ago that was true, but nowadays the difference between the tax that you get on a dividend and the tax that you get from the salary are very, very, very limited indeed. So we're actually talking about 3 million people, many of whom, if they do have to go to the war, are not just losing their own job and livelihood, but are taking hundreds of thousands of other people down with them. I just don't think that there appears to be an appreciation at the heart of government. And it's a strange thing to say about a Conservative government, but I don't think they understand business. I don't think they appreciate how business operates, how business runs, the importance of cash flow, and also the anxiety that comes from being a business owner. So again, I appreciate that there'll be many people out there who are worried about the jobs, and I get that. But, I only employ 15 people, Jay. My biggest concern at night is, am I going to be able to maintain those 15 jobs? Because, those people are part of the downtown family, and we want to make sure that we can support them as best we can. I'm fortunate. We've got a great commercial landlord in Bruntwood. I think Liverpool City Council have been fabulous in terms of the way that they've been able to help and support businesses through this crisis. But nonetheless, another 12 months of this, and we certainly wouldn't been able to maintain the level of staff that we've got. So, there's business owners out there who I know on a daily basis now are going to bed, sleepless nights, worried, not for themselves, but for their staff and for the people that they've been supporting for many, many years now. So, as I say, I just don't think there's a recognition from government, the pressure that business owners are under, and the way in which, as I say, businesses operate. It's a strange thing, as I say, for me to be having to make that commentary on a Tory government.
Frank, if you are a business owner, a small maybe cafe owner, maybe you've got, I don't know, a bike repair shop, and you're watching this right now, what advice would you give someone who's maybe started up a business, worked their socks off, like we all have to set up these little businesses in the city, and are really scared about the future? What advice would you give them?
Uh, Talk to people, seek out peer groups where you can get support and you can have a whinge and have a moan, because lots of people are at the moment, and there's not just Downtown in Business, there's many other organizations out there who can offer that sort of facility. We've set up something, Jay, called Downtown Bubbles, and that's sort of 6 people coming together, sadly on Zoom again now. But that's proved great comfort for some people, because they're talking to others who are in similar situations, and they can bounce ideas off one another, and they can support each other through this situation. More importantly, perhaps they can talk about what next, and they can refer potential pipeline business to one another as well. So talk to people, don't bottle it up, because that's the worst thing you can do, and look at what help might be out there. There is another set of funding coming along. Liverpool City Council, other local authorities across the country are just awaiting what the criteria is going to be. But as I said earlier, Liverpool City Council have been fantastic in terms of getting that money out the door once they know who they can award that cash to. And that criteria, I think, will be with us by Friday. So we should see some of that money starting to be distributed next week, the week after at the very latest. And again, what the City Council and the Combined Authority in Liverpool have been very good at is creating discretionary funds. So if you're a business who can genuinely demonstrate that you are, if not fully closed, partially closed, and you've got a viable business moving forward, so long as you can get a little bit of financial support now, then there is an application process that you can go through, and that support may be there. We're quite happy to help people if they want us to talk through that. And I think what we will do, actually, Jay, is we'll get City Council representatives onto a call, maybe do it in conjunction with you guys, actually, where we can talk through the various help and support that's available. So at least people then can see what's out there. Again, the biggest fear of businesses is, mountains and mountains of paperwork, and then at the end of it, you don't get anything. Again, what we've come up with in the city, I think, is a very simplified application process. And I think, as I say, if we could do that call, then that might benefit people, and they can hear exactly what's available.
Do you know what? These calls are great, by the way. If you haven't watched them yet, the Downtown Den, it's brilliant. And I love the range of guests that you have on there, Frank. Kind of really inspiring, some of those guests that you've spoke to over the past 12 months, but also really helpful as well. So let's talk about that. Some of the people you spoke to range from the chief constable of Merseyside Police, for instance, the head of comms for Liverpool City Council. Have you got a favourite guest from the past 12 months in the Downtown Den?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I love a guy called Michael Finnegan, who's a motivational speaker. I've known Michael for many, many years, and he does an event for us every year. He goes to each different city, and he's worked with some of the biggest sports champions on the planet. So he's got some great stories, as you can imagine. And he actually worked with Everton, as you know, Jay, close to my heart, of course, for about 7 or 8 years with David Moyes. But he's worked with many people, as I say. Jimmy White was his first sort of big name client. He's got some fantastic stories. But ordinarily, when he comes to our events, he'll talk about how you motivate yourself as a business leader, business owner, very focused really on a business message. Anyway, this chat I did with him, which was probably early doors of the first lockdown, we just had a chat like we would as mates, when we go out to a restaurant or a bar, and he tells me these wonderful anecdotes that he's got. And he just went through this list. It was Jimmy White, it was Darren Clark, it was David Moyes, it was Alex Ferguson, it was Sam Allardyce. It was like, it was just a fabulous conversation. So that was probably my favourite because it had nothing to do with business or politics. And then in terms of the two standout interviews for me with politicians, all the local guys have been great. And it was good to get, again, early on, Steve Rotherham and Andy Burnham on a call together. But at a national level, I think we often look at Westminster now and think it seems a very remote place, and none of them really understand what's happening in the north. And I think that there's an increasing feeling almost of a divide now, isn't there? And when I say the north now, by the way, I mean Birmingham and the Midlands as well, because the businesses that we work with there are facing exactly the same frustrations that we have. They say they don't understand, they don't get how life works in this part of the world. But I actually spoke to a government minister. She's the Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships, a woman called Gillian Keegan. And obviously we focused on what is going to be a massively important area moving forward, because you've got 3 million people unemployed, you've got less jobs for people to go after, young people need to be creating opportunities and improving their skill set. And it transpires that Gillian, although she represents a seat down south, is from Huyton.
Right.
And so, to speak to her for an hour and to actually feel as though you had somebody who understood and appreciated their brief and clearly knows Liverpool well, that was great. And Gillian's agreed to come and visit the City of Liverpool College when it's safe to do so this year. But, more importantly, I think, and more impressively, she'd been an apprentice herself. That's the way in which she forged a career. And again, what it did strike me at the end of it was how great it is to have someone who's got life experience doing a job that they actually know about. And I don't think there's enough politicians from any party who can actually say that. And the other national politician that we spoke to, and we've done a couple of things with him, he's now the Shadow Education Minister. He was on the Robert Peston show last night, actually. I call him Labour's baby-faced assassin. It's a guy called Wes Streeting.
Right.
And Wes, I mean, I don't know him well. I've only sort of met him through Zoom calls and had a couple of conversations with him on the telephone. But you can't help but be impressed with the analysis that he has of the crisis. And again, bit like the Marcus Rashford story. People say, well, why is Marcus Rashford getting involved in free school? Well, because that's his life experience. Wes's life experience is very much, he's made it as a parliamentarian because of his background. Came from a very, very poor background in London, an incredible backstory, really. And he's now doing a job that he absolutely loves because he wants to make a difference. So, they might not be household names to everybody listening to this, but I tell you, Gillian Keegan, Wes Streeting, in 5 years' time, if we can get them to a downtown event, and I'm sure we will, there'll be literally hundreds of people wanting to see them, because they are people who, hopefully, if this country is going to get out of this and get out of it in a creative way, it's people like that should be at the top of the tree in our political world.
Well, listen, just check them out, because as Frank said, then the range of guests is incredible. The stories that they tell and the stories you get out of them are a great watch as well, and certainly give you a little bit of inspiration around now. Frank, I was at the Liverpool Awards, which was an awards with a difference at the M&S Bank Arena, but I felt so safe in there. I was a little bit worried about going, as I'm sure other people were. Just before Christmas, the awards took place. How much work did you and your team put into that with the arena to deliver such a great, secure event?
Yeah, I think my input into it was negligible, if I'm honest. The team were fantastic. My team and the team from the arena probably had a dozen meetings before we were comfortable with hosting the event in the way that we did. There was 250 people in the room. Jay, you obviously one of them. We insisted on people being mandatory tested before they entered the event. We were a bit nervous about that beforehand because we thought it may put some people off. It had the opposite effect. We got more people taking tickets once we introduced the testing regime. So that was great. We obviously spoke to the public health officials. Matt Ashton was fabulously supportive. He made sure that we were protected as an organisation and the arena, because we're both high profile organisations. We've got reputations as well. So we didn't want to be doing anything that fell outside of the guidelines and the regulations. But I think the positive thing on the day was that although it was a much low key event in comparison to what downtown events in particular are usually like, because they're a bit raucous, as you will know, Jay, the awards dinners and so on. But it was that fact that people were just so pleased to be out and being able to see people face to face. And, you know, we were able to celebrate through what's been a challenging year, some great success stories. And I was delighted, mate, to be able to present you and the Guide Liverpool with the Business of the Year award, because we wanted to acknowledge the fantastic things that you've done. Because, you know, I don't go to a hospitality venue in our city without your name and the Guide Liverpool being mentioned. The appreciation out there for the work that you guys have done has been absolutely superb. So it was great for us to be able to celebrate businesses like you, who, despite all of the shit that's flying around, have just kept going and kept supporting our business community in our city. So I thought it was a great day, Jay. Not what we had wanted to do, obviously. We don't want to do one of them every year, but certainly I think at the time, first major business event in the country.
Yeah.
No other awards events have taken place since last March. So I think a feather in the cap, certainly for the city and hopefully for downtown and business as well.
I just couldn't believe how well behaved everyone was, Franco. I kept looking over to the side of the room, looking at Dave Seed, thinking he's going to be up dancing soon, but no one was. Everyone just stuck to their group, their table. And, you know, again, from all of us at the team at the Guide, it was we keep thinking back to that day and thinking, oh, we wish we were back at the Downtown Awards, even though it was different. So no, it was great, and a great bit of escapism for those who were there. You did have a guest on the stage during those awards, and that was Tony Reeves. I won't keep you much longer, Frank. Chief Exec of Liverpool City Council. That's kind of inspired us to get him on the Guide and deliver the message he delivered to you, to our audience as well. Really positive influence. Tony was when you were chatting to him. What do you think that Liverpool needs to do now to move forward? You know, what should Tony and the rest of the city council do, the business community as a whole? How can we kind of recover from this?
Well, we're working across all the cities. So, you know, I sit on business leaders groups in many different places. And I have to say that Liverpool is an exemplar in terms of where we're at. So I think we're in a great place. That's the important first point to make. I think Tony Reeves and his team have been able to establish really strong relationships with Whitehall and with government officials. And so the testing regime that was put in place was a risk, because you'll remember, Jay, there was an awful lot of nervousness around Liverpool at the time. So, oh, well, our figures are just going to go through the roof because everybody's going to get tested. Yeah. And of course, the opposite happened. We were able to identify those people who were infected, get them isolated, and then get into tier 2. So although it's been a really torrid time for business, at least our hospitality sector was able to have a decent Christmas trade. So I think Tony and his team, as I say, are in a good place in terms of having those conversations. And then the recovery plan that's been put together with the City Council and the Combined Authority has some big ambitious plans in there. So again, I won't bore you with the detail, but if you go onto the Combined Authority website, the plan is in there, and it's really about, you know, developing on what we know is already a great natural asset base for Liverpool. So basically enhancing and accelerating the growth of our digital and technology companies, looking at how we can get involved in the green energy agenda. Listen, we've got the River Mersey. We've got some fantastic natural assets right across Liverpool, so we need to be utilising them. We all know about some of the big developments that are happening in the city centre, new Everton Stadium, of course, some of the other things that are happening at Liverpool Waters. Then you go up to the Knowledge Quarter and you see the great work that Colin Sinclair's doing up there. It's really positive. You know, under any normal circumstances, we would be sitting here celebrating probably a growth spurt for Liverpool's economy that we've never experienced before. So I'm really optimistic about the future. I'm still very much glass half full. We've just got to try and get through this next period of challenge. But honestly, Jay, if you look at the work that's happening behind the scenes and the coordination, you know, the togetherness of the business community, the city council, the combined authority, I've never seen it as united. So I think we're in a great place. We just need, as I say, a little bit more additional support from government, and then to crack on in the entrepreneurial, determined and committed way that you and I know Scousers can do.
Listen, Frank, really inspiring stuff, and we have got it all to look forward to in Liverpool. Please check out Downtown in Liverpool. Whether you're in business, maybe a business owner, maybe a little bit of an entrepreneur of the future, check out Downtown in Liverpool and check out the Downtown Den. Frank, what's to come on the Downtown Den? What can we expect in the coming months?
Yeah, we've done our first one already, which was leaders from across the Northern Powerhouse. So we had the leader of Newcastle City Council and the leader of something called the Northern Powerhouse 11, chairs all of the LEPs for the North, a guy called Roger Marsh. So that was an interesting chat. We've got, I think Tony Reeves is doing something with us in the not too distant future. I'm trying to line up Steve Rotherham. Got a call with Steve on Monday to try and get something in the diary. I'm trying to think what else. If you go onto the website, all the events are on there. We do that many. We did over 100 dens during the lockdown period from March to December. But equally, you know, I can say this to you and you'll appreciate it. We do lots of this stuff and it's a substitute for the real thing, but there's nothing like live events. So, you know, as soon as it's safe and within the guidelines to do so, we'll move our events back live again. We've been talking to some venues about doing hybrid events. So, you know, we're not going to be allowed to have hundreds of people in a venue, but we certainly probably be able to go back to that situation we had sort of September, October, November, where we could do events up for 30. You know, the other great thing when you're in these situations is speakers that ordinarily you think probably going to have to wait 6-7 months before we can get them. They're sort of saying, you know, give us
we'll do a Zoom.
We'll do a Zoom. So yeah, we've got loads. I mean, the events team have been working hard in December to come up with the program. I tend to be one of these guys, Jay, that I don't look too far ahead. I sort of wake up of a morning or maybe the night before and I'll say, oh, that's interesting. I'm interviewing them tomorrow. And the other thing that I never do, and I think you're a bit like this as well, is I don't do too much preparation for the interview because I prefer to have a flowing conversation rather than it being too staged. And on occasion, we'll get particularly politicians advisors will phone our team up and say, well, what's Frank going to ask them? And my team are dead honest and say, well, he doesn't know yet.
So it's a bugbearer of mine, Frank. I've had that for years and years, and whether it's a celebrity or because you don't know, you haven't got a clue.
It depends what their first answer is.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. You know, and that's how you get into a good conversation. The worst interviews I always find when I'm watching is if they do go down that road of agreeing a set of questions, and the politician will say something really interesting, but because they're sticking to the script, it's gone. So we don't do any of that. And equally, it's terrible. So you ask me what events you've got lined up, and I'm sort of trying to busily think of the names I've heard being bandied about in the office. If Heather was on here, our head of events, she'd be able to reel them all off for you, you know. But many events coming up, mate.
We'll look forward to them all, Frank, and we'll put loads of info on the Guide Liverpool as well, linking to your site. Frank McKenna from Downtown in Liverpool, Downtown in Business. Keep up the good work, mate. Thank you.
Top man, lovely to speak to you, Jay, and good luck to everyone this year.